Hello and welcome back to the library with Miss Kinsley. I have a really exciting new book to read to you. So it is new to our school library. It just came in a few weeks ago. So I'm excited to share it with you. So we'll get started, and then I do have some announcements about some upcoming things that we'll be doing. So make sure you stay on for that. All right, our story today is called The Floating Field, how a group of Thai boys built their own soccer field. Why don't you take a look at the cover there? And I'm actually going to read to you before we get started the inside book jacket. So we've talked about the jacket helps protect the book, and so the inside can also give us a summary, and this summary is important for us to read so we can understand what is going on in the book. So let me read it to you. Prasad Hemant was obsessed with soccer. Any other soccer fans out there? And his friends were too. But the teen boys could play only twice a month, only 2 times a month, when the tide was low enough for the sandbar to serve as a field. That's because their home, the small island of Koh Phangan, Thailand, didn't have enough space for them to play on. Unless, inspired by the 1986 World Cup, Prasad and his friends built their own floating soccer field, unlike any other playing surface in the world. Their field's quirks prompted some unusual rules. Anyone who kicked the ball out of bounds had to jump into the ocean to retrieve it. But they also helped the players develop exceptional footwork. Okay, so that's a really important part of our story, was these boys, because of where they lived in Thailand, the tide, so the ocean, would go down twice a month, low enough for them to play on by the tide on the beach. So only twice a month. Can you imagine that? So let's go ahead and start reading to hear more about Prasad's story. Koh Phangan, Thailand, 1986. Prasad Hemant lived in a village on stilts. Prasad woke early each morning before school to help his father. Together, they loaded the longboat with nets while his mother brewed coffee and sliced jackfruit in the kitchen. So that is jackfruit. I have not heard of that before or had it. Like many villagers, Prasad's father spent his days fishing for groupers and prawns. He spent his nights tying nets and dreaming of the next day's catch. But Prasad dreamed of other things than fish, and last night the moon had been full. These are beautiful pictures. Prasad's father revved the boat's motor and headed out to sea. Prasad waved, then raced along the raised walkways to Uncle's coffee shop. The others were already there. Uncle welcomed Prasad and his friends with plates of fried dough. Between sugary bites, the boys made important decisions. You can see all of his friends there. Who will carry the poles? Who's on which team? Who gets to kick first? Above them, the full moon had set and the sun was rising. Below them, the tides were already shifting. The moment school ended, the boys rushed to the pier. The tide was finally out and a sandbar glistened in the distance. The boys jumped into a boat and paddled furiously. Prasad and his friends planted the poles, here they are, and got into position. With the ball in play, they dug in their toes and chased it across hard-packed ripples of sand. So what are they playing on right now? Sand. They weaved in between other players to get open, and when they got close, they took a shot. Goal! So what are the poles used as? Goalposts. Good job. Back and forth the boys played as longboats returned from the sea full of fathers and fish. Waves soon crept in. The field narrowed. In minutes, the sandbar disappeared. The game was over. Prasad and his friends drifted back to the pier, their laughter echoing off the cliff. With the sandbar gone, the boys could only dream about playing, and the tides were low enough once more. So they had to stop playing because the water, the tide rose, so it washed away the sandbar, so they can't play anymore now. But this month, the boys could still watch the game they loved. The World Cup was on, and teams from across the globe were playing in a far-off place called Mexico. At Uncle's coffee shop, the boys huddled around the television, the only one on the island. Can you imagine? One day, after cheering for a team that came back from behind, someone suggested they form their own team. Everyone agreed. But a real soccer team needed a real field, so they're discussing these things. Prasad looked out where the sandbar lay hidden under the sea. He thought about their floating village, built from nothing but wooden planks and metal roofs. We could make our own field, he offered. The boys nodded in agreement. The next day after school, the boys scattered. Some searched for scraps of wood and empty barrels. Others swam out to abandoned fish farms to collect loose styrofoam. At the pier, they stacked materials and began building. Hammers flew, nails bent, boards split. Prasad and his friends had no plan. Somehow, that didn't matter. What do you think their field's going to look like? Let's keep reading. For days, the boys collected wood from broken boats and old docks. Arms full, they hauled it all back to the pier. Prasad handed planks down from the boats. So there's a plank. Drifting in the tides, they fixed them to floating barrels and makeshift buoys. Villagers heard what the boys were up to. Some walked by, shaking their heads. One even shouted, "You're crazy! Look around you. You can't play soccer. Not here." But the boys didn't listen. Whoa, look. Sea eagles wheeled overhead and they worked. Barrels and boards formed a platform. So here's their platform. Some boys tethered it down below. Others painted the edges, not the eagles. A few began to frame knee-high goalposts. After weeks of work, their floating field was complete. With fishnet goals at each end, it tethered in the waves. That's cool that they use fishnets, because that's the material that they had. No longer needing the moon to tug at the tides, Prasad and his friends headed straight to their field every day after school. Loose boards and bent nails forced fancy footwork. So did the field's sidelines. When the ball bounced into the water, the kicker had to follow, so they had to go in and get the ball. While with the ball in play, they bounced on their toes and chased across the rickety boards. The ball moved faster now, and the boys raced to keep up. So they're playing like on the water with this platform. They waved in between other players to get open, and when they got close, they took a shot. Goal! Villagers still walked by, but they no longer shook their heads. Instead, they stopped to watch. Some even cheered. With news of an upcoming tournament on the mainland reached the island, the boys decided to take a chance and sign up. On the morning of the tournament, Prasad and his friends walked to the pier in their mismatched journeys and ragtag shorts. Before their longboat pushed off, a group of villagers ran toward them. Some carried baskets, others waved their hands. The boys hadn't been the only ones planning for the tournament. Reaching into their baskets, friends and family pulled out new jerseys, matching shorts, and a pair of cleats for each player. The boys beamed. That means they smiled really big. So did the villagers. The Panyi Football Club was born. Later that morning, on the mainland, the island boys got into position for their first game, this time on a field of grass. Across from them, opponents bounced on toes, ready to play. Prasad and his team stood flat-footed, nervous. But with the ball in play, the boys remembered what to do. They passed it down the field, they weaved it between other players to get open, and when they got close, they took a shot. Goal! By that afternoon, after winning several games, the Peony Football Club had reached the semifinals. Once again, Prasad and his team lined up and waited for the referee's whistle. As the game began, the sky darkened. Within minutes, sheets of rain came pouring down, drenching uniforms, filling cleats, and flooding the field. Would you like to play in weather like that? I wouldn't. The other team adjusted. Prasad's did not. At the half, Peony Football Club was down 2-0. The boys sat silently on the bench, raindrops pelting their heads. They needed to turn the game around. Yeah, they look a little defeated right now. Prasad looked at his friends, his teammates. He thought about how they played on their floating field. Look at the picture. What do you think Prasad's going to do? Reaching down, he unlaced his shoes and peeled off his socks. His teammates followed, nodding. Barefoot, they ran back onto the field. Without waterlogged shoes, the boys moved quickly, just like they always had, passing give and goes. And racing to the goal, the Peony Football Club scored twice. With only minutes to play, both teams battled for the ball. Finally, a player from the other team trapped it, dribbled down the field, and struck it one more time. The ball sailed into the net just past the goalie's reach. The boys from Co-Peony had lost. But that day, in their very first tournament, the Peony Football Club came in third place. That's amazing. On their way back home, Prasad and his teammates yelled and cheered over the boat's rattling motor. As the boys drifted back to the pier, their laughter echoed off the cliff once again. But this time, they didn't have to dream about when they'd play next. They had their floating field where they could play the game they loved whenever they wanted. All right, there are some photographs here that I wanted to share with you. So this is a map of Thailand where the boys are from, and this is Koh Phangan, where they actually lived. Okay, so the whole orange section is Thailand. Here's a picture of the current floating field. It has a blue covering right there. So that's what it looks like today. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the story today. I thought that was so cool that these boys love soccer so much that they found a way to play. So my question for you today is in Seesaw is, would you like to play on a floating soccer field? Why or why not? Okay, so here are my announcements. One is we'll be wrapping up book requests within the next week or so. So I'll send a date soon, and then we'll have an opportunity for summer book checkout if that is something that your families are comfortable with. So you could check out some books for this summer. And so that means that you would have to come to school to pick up the book. So I will have some more information on that as well. So stay tuned in the next week or two for more information. All right, I hope you have a great day. Thank you for coming.